Afternoon, New York. Thanks for coming by to hear my talk. Can we get to, so let's see. Well, we got pretty much clear aisles now. So, fess up. Who here is here because they are interested in applying to point now or in the future? A couple of hands in the audience. Seniors? Juniors? What? Grad school. Okay, for this one, grad school. Sophomores or freshmen? Sub-freshmen? There we go. Mom's pointing at this one over here. So what I want to do today is talk to you all a little bit about what our application process is like and how we evaluate the sorts of students who might come and choose to spend a weekend of their time during the Patriots game in the fourth quarter, which I was not watching backstage, making creative things. So my name is Chris Peterson. I am Assistant Director for Talented Outreach at MIT's Office of Admissions, and I oversee our recruitment, evaluation, enrollment of makers, entrepreneurs, and academic superstars. Basically, my job is to go around the area, go around the country, go around the world, find the smartest, most creative kids and make sure that they understand our process and what our institution is all about. And that journey has brought me here to the old World's Fair Arena in Queens to talk to y'all a little bit about what it is that we do. Now, has anybody here ever been to MIT's campus? Lots of hands. Okay. Well, anybody here an alumnus of MIT? Couple of hands. Okay, I'll just have to, just don't call out my lies. Was anybody here on MIT's campus 3 weeks ago? Just like one or two. Well, if the rest of you had joined them, you would have seen this in the middle of one of our dormitory courtyards. This is a roller coaster that was constructed in the middle of one of the courtyards to welcome freshmen to campus, complete with an accompanying 3-story fort with a cell phone queue. You will notice a sign, "No fun, science only." Now, your initial thought, quite reasonably, might be, wow, colleges are really going overboard in terms of the sorts of things they need to do to welcome their kids to campus. But this was actually built over the course of 3 days and a lot of trips to Home Depot by MIT undergraduates. You can see here my friend Danny, triumphant. He's from the Upper West Side, very excited as they near the final construction of this roller coaster. Actually, you'll also see that there's, in the back left corner here, a couple of students just hanging from a tree, sitting on a couch. I walked by and I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Oh, just hanging around." Anyway, now, as I said, this was built by students. Specifically, it was built by some of these students in the next slide. Dano, is my slide deck working? Yep. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology that doesn't work. All right. What do we? One moment. We'll edit this in post. You're going to plug it in for me? Thank you. All right. So this was built by some of these students. You have Ben, Lauren, Wesley, Amanda, Jaguar, and they are all, they got together over the summer. They scoped out the design. They got it approved by the city of Cambridge. They put 1-inch steel bolts everywhere. And they then built a lot of it with help from their friends, but these were some of the students who built it. And in fact, MIT students build a lot of stuff. They built houses, they built carpentry. Ben in high school had built a robot that could climb trees. It was terrifying. Lauren was a lead on her first robotics team in high school. And we're a community of people who love to make, right? And that's why some of us are here in the audience right now. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of MIT, because I think that in order to understand where our institution is today vis-a-vis making, you sort of need to understand where we've come from. A few months ago now, we had this big project with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, we being a bunch of partner organizations and the Make movement. Dale gave this great quote about what the Make movement is all about to a guy from OSTP, and I really love that he emphasizes that it's this broad mode of creativity, and also that it sits at the intersection of art and science. And this is something that is actually true of MIT as well. So our founder, William Barton Rogers, got it into his fool head that he wanted to create MIT as an institution because he thought that there was a historical delineation between the sorts of people who actually made things and the sorts of people who thought about stuff and really tried to think analytically and rigorously, right? The mind and the hand were separate modes of mastery, and never did the twain meet. And he thought that this was foolish, and so he wanted to create an institution that was where the mind and hand were united, where people would really understand how to make things and also why the things that they made work. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, so this is the object plan that I dug out of the MIT archives for this occasion. You can see that it's an institute of technology, including, and the thing that comes first is a society of arts and a museum of arts and a school of industrial science. Now, art at this point, in the sense of this, the useful arts, as you'll find in the Constitution, in the Progress Clause, a society of arts, it means artisanship, right? Crafting. The useful arts meaning the sorts of things that artisans would make. And that's really powerful. And if you notice on our seal, we have mens et manus, we have science and the arts, and we have the craftsman and the scholar that are representing the ways in which these things come together at MIT. You will notice that the craftsman and the scholar are looking away from each other, which seems like a bit of an oversight from the graphic design department of 1865. But, we created it, and, change is scary, I guess. Now, and we've also had these technically creative students for a very long time. There's a letter in our admissions office hanging on the wall from Thomas Edison to a colleague basically saying, you should hire MIT students, they're very good. These are students in the MIT hobby shop. I think it's 1937 this picture was taken. These were a bunch of students who basically found some unused basement space in one of our buildings and petitioned the president and said, we just want a place to put some donated mills and start making things. And you can see that they're machining and cutting. You'll notice that in fashion for the time, they're actually all wearing suits and ties under these little cloaks, with the exception of this guy who's wearing like a pair of jeans and a jean shirt. So I can only assume that Dean Kamen has a time machine. And nowadays, the shops at MIT look a little bit different. We have the Edgerton Center, the Solar Electronic Vehicle team. This is the hobby shop today. This is MITRES, the student-run hackerspace, the Electronic Research Society. This is not a shop. This is my friend Dan, who in the MIT Media Lab shop made a bunch of lights that he could control with his brain from this EEG, just because it was a thing that he could do, because science. He spent this past summer with a bunch of friends out in Oakland making this into a car that they could drive around the playa at Burning Man. It was covered in the Atlantic with the title, "The Most Burning Man Thing Ever." So what does our admissions process look like? Well, now one of the things that's true about MIT is that it's always been hard to get into, but it used to be somewhat more straightforward. This is what the admissions requirements looked like at MIT in the 1930s. Before we started our selective admissions process, it was basically you had to pass a lot of hard classes, but then you just sent in a piece of paper, and it was as long as you passed them, you got in. And there were still students at those times who were doing things. This is a model of the Cape Cod Canal built by a couple of students during the Great Depression. They were trying to figure out how they could fix the canal down in Cape Cod, make it actually usable. They employed people to just use hand tools rather than machines because they were trying to bring employment back up. Things changed over time, but we basically still had the same sort of thing. We would have an application, and for many years we had a question that basically said, show us or tell us something that you made. So, this is a young man who applied in 2009. He had built the largest Tesla coil in Singapore in his backyard. It is still the largest Tesla coil in Singapore, to my understanding. He just graduated. And so for a long time, you applied to MIT, and if you passed the requirements, you got in. Then once we started having selective college admissions, we would ask students to tell us some things. And this sufficed for a long time. And then this happened, which is to say, as more and more and more people applied to MIT, it sort of becomes harder to make sure that you're admitting everybody that you want to make. And that's why you have a big selection admissions process. That's why you have all these committees. But there's a risk then that you lose certain sorts of students if you're not taking extra efforts to identify them, because there's now so many different sorts of students applying. There's also a tension commensurate with this increased selectivity and competitiveness, where you're only doing things that you think are going to get you into college, even if they're not actually the things that are going to get you into college. Our dean in Inside Higher Ed a few years ago wrote this essay, More to Life Than AP. And he works with the AP, he serves on an advisory board, but he also was an FLL coach for his daughter's team. And he was like, look, you really should be doing the things that you love and the things that you're passionate about and the things that are creative. And that's what's really important to people, including people who work in our office. So a few years ago, we decided, I guess last year was the official year that we had it launched, we decided that we wanted to create a maker portfolio, analogous to what colleges have had for years and years and years around art and music and the performing arts and architecture and athletics portfolios and so on and so forth, that we would go out there and ask technically creative students to tell us about the things that they made. Now, so here's what the Maker Portfolio is and isn't, right? It is a tool to help you express your technical creativity, and it's a way to demonstrate some of the skills that you have. It's not a golden ticket. It's not a magical way to get into MIT. No matter what you make, it's not going to be impressive enough to get into MIT on your own, and it's not something that you need to do at all. So I just want to put that out there that all of our supplements, all of our portfolios are optional. They're really optional. This is not like soft required. This is something that some people find a useful vehicle to express some part of themselves. And if you would find it useful, then go ahead and do so. So what does the process look like? Well, you go to our website, and when you start filling out your application at MIT, we have a set of portfolios. You can select the Maker Portfolio, and you can submit it. This has some questions. I'll go over them in a little bit. The Maker Portfolio is then routed to an engineering advisory board. These are members of MIT's academic and instructional staff, particularly those who work closely with undergraduates and who are able, with subject matter expertise, to evaluate a Maker Portfolio and say, okay, yeah, for this type of student, for this type of work, here's how exceptional it is in the MIT context. Here's what they would contribute to our campus. Here's the sorts of groups that they would go into. They rate it and they annotate it in this way because not everybody in the admissions office is going to have this level of subject matter expertise. So the EAB basically says, look, I'm an expert in this particular field. Here's the significance of this work. Here's what they're trying to do. Here's some context around it. And now you can make a more informed decision. It's appended to the application. We concatenate the PDFs. And we read them at the same time we're reading the rest of your application. And we review it then with the full admissions committee. The questions that we have this year are pretty simple and straightforward. What do you make? Like, we have checkboxes so that you can have some general categories like software or hardware, carpentry, woodworking, metalwork, needlework, any of these different things. If we haven't come up with your particular category, you can enter in your own. There's also a short essay answer question, 250 words or less, really describe whatever it is for us. How do you make it? Where are your machines? What are your resources? What's the infrastructure required? Why do you make? What really drives you to do this as opposed to any other fully legitimate thing with your time? And tell us about the most significant thing that you've made, the thing that you're most proud of. And then you attach pictures, video, code, tech specs, anything else into the file. An effective Maker portfolio clearly answers the questions that we're asking. It helps us understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and it shows rather than just tells. The media portfolio should be well executed. It's an opportunity for you to help us understand what you're doing. Operationally, this means if you're going to take pictures, make sure that they're like reasonably well lit. Any smartphone is capable of taking the sorts of things that we need. It doesn't require special equipment or special production values. It just means that don't take a grainy black and white dark photo and expect us to know what's going on. And a big part of this is understanding that you are your own best advocate. Admissions officers and even our EAB can't read your mind. So don't assume that we know anything. Don't assume that we understand how your team works or your hackerspace works. Don't assume that we know what a particular thing is. Assume that you're talking to a group of intelligent people who have absolutely no background in whatever it is that you're doing. Obviously, the technical specifications can assume some level of expertise, but for the essay questions, we really want to hear a layman's summary of these things. And generally speaking, this is actually true for all parts of a selective admissions process. So when you go into writing your essays, you're more interesting than anyone you could pretend to be, as long as you let yourself come out, and really be clear and compelling with the sorts of answers that you're providing. If you really want more background on how to effectively complete your Maker portfolio, I suggest that you watch the talk that my colleague Dawn Wendell gave at Maker Faire Bay Area last year. It's up on the website. It's pretty prominent. She did an excellent job at describing how we work through these things, how to effectively pitch your presentation. She has a PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT. She's a senior lecturer in the mechanical engineering department, helped form the EAB. And the questions have changed a little bit from last year, but the basic thrust of her observations really remains the same. So, last year was the first year that we'd run a Maker portfolio. As I said, for years and years and years, we've had these technically creative students applying to MIT. We just didn't have a standardized and formalized process around which to do it. It was sort of an application would come in, you'd be like, oh, that looks cool, that looks interesting. I'll kick it over to my colleague who really has a background in this particular area, get their opinion on it if I don't fully understand it. But this was the first year that we had a Maker portfolio as such, and we wanted to see what would happen. Last year we had a little bit over 18,000 applicants to MIT, and as you can see, we admitted a small subset of those. We're a very selective school. About over 1,000 students submitted Maker portfolios. 178 of them were identified as distinguished makers in our process, and 118 of those who submitted Maker portfolios were admitted. About half of those were distinguished makers. Now what this means is that, as I said earlier, a Maker portfolio doesn't get you into MIT. What a Maker portfolio does is tell us, here are the things that you make, and it probably signals to us that you're the sort of student who culturally might be well matched to MIT to be surrounded by these sorts of technically creative people. Not a golden ticket, but a good way to express yourself, and something that we pay a lot of attention to and something that we love to see. Now, you'll notice this term distinguished here, so like, what do I mean by a distinguished maker? Is it like that your Doctor Who socks are exceptionally well made and fancy? No. A distinguished maker in our process just means that the Engineering Advisory Board really has identified you as somebody with an exceptional level of skill or an exceptional ability to contribute to our community by mentoring other people, by really helping them learn how to make. A particular level of creative insight that would be really valuable in whatever your domain of creativity is. These are all things that we really value. And as you saw on the last slide, as many of our students who weren't distinguished, who submitted a Maker portfolio, were admitted as those who were. It's just a mode of us understanding and evaluating and weighing your impact. So these are some of the things that were distinguished makers last year that I pulled out. You have here a really nice, beautiful, handmade chess set that actually has this interesting feature and rule set, according to Valerie, its creator, where you have this middle thing in between the chess where the chess pieces can teleport between boards under certain conditions, and then you can sort of play this multi-dimensional chess game that she really liked. She wrote up the rule set, submitted the rule set along with pictures of the board. We have this young woman who machined, soldered, wired this cast iron lamp, and then sent in a picture of herself with a piece of grass. Her family's from Louisiana. She was like, this is me as a cultural redneck with my big metal lamp. Love me. We have here all of these cubby creations, from this girl, Piper, elaborately crocheted. She does a thriving Etsy business with all of her knit things. And we have Word Waddle, which is an iOS game. It's sort of like Words with Friends, but with more ducks. And I bring these up not because there are any of these things are like the right answer. You know, if you come back next year and you're like, yeah, Goose Game. I'm like, it's not going to be like, oh, wow, we should admit them to MIT. It's just like, these are a semi-random selection of things that we really liked last year that showed this level of creativity, that had some nice pictures. This is actually a still from a video that really showed how the game worked, how it had been designed, the different game states and mechanics that obtained, and so forth. So what were the successes of the Maker portfolio? We standardized this formerly ad hoc process, right, which helped us out in terms of planning time, allocating resources, making sure that things were being read consistently. Our goal this year is that actually every Maker portfolio will be read by 2 separate members of the EAB, so that we'll have, be able to check for consistency and ratings across people with the same expertise, and really make sure that we understand what people are doing and understand it well. Again, this expert evaluation of technically creative talent, frankly, it signals to applicants that we value what they're doing. One of the things that I remember hearing before we implemented this portfolio was people would kind of say, well, I always hear about MIT, things that MIT students make, or the crazy things that they're doing, but how can I send you, what I do? How can I send you pictures? How can I send you YouTube videos? And one of the things that the Maker portfolio does for us is it gives us this vehicle and this mode, which helps us understand that the students are welcome here and that we really love and value the things that they make. Challenges. Applicants still don't know what belongs in the Maker portfolio, and neither do we. I'm sure as you've walked around here this weekend, you've noticed that there's just a billion different things that happen at any Maker Faire, and that's one of the things that's really wonderful about the Make movement, broadly defined. The tension for us is that at the end of the day, we have to read every application, and we have to have people who are able to assess different levels of creativity. So we always are trying to play and establish this boundary space where, on the one hand, we want to be as open as possible to everything that you can send and that you make, while at the same time putting some rails around it so that our applicants and our engineering advisory board understand exactly what it is that we want to see and what they want to rate and how they should consider it. One of the things that we've done this year is we've reworded the intro to the essay and really described what the EAB is. And we had students last year, you send in a video of you dancing in your backyard to a Taylor Swift song with a cardboard cutout of Zac Efron, and it's like, that's cute, you're adorable. I might like you because of that video, and I might like your application, but it's not something that we would consider for a Maker portfolio. Negotiating that space is always difficult. We anticipate this being a work in progress, and we have tried to leave it as open as possible. And the last challenge is that, frankly, our Maker applicants are still not representative for MIT or for the Make movement as a whole. So our undergraduate population is pretty evenly split by gender, for example, 55% male, 45% female. But our Maker, the students who submitted Maker portfolios were 85% male. And we don't really have like a majority race or ethnicity. We have a really broad demographic grouping at our MIT undergraduate level. But only 6% of our Maker portfolios came from ethnic or racial backgrounds that are historically underrepresented in STEM. And so we need to do better in terms of reaching out to these sorts of students. And we need support from the Make movement, from schools, to really help us build this pipeline. I mean, this isn't solely our problem, right? The gender, racial, demographic challenges in the STEM pipeline are well documented, and lots of speakers here this weekend have talked about it. But it is something that we want to strive towards. You know, the Make movement and MIT are incredibly inclusive, and we really hope that our Maker portfolio will reflect that eventually, and that the sorts of students we're considering will be able to benefit from that. So what have we done differently, again, for this coming year? We've reduced the number of questions. We made them open-ended, provided a clear explanation. I gave you this year's questions a little bit earlier. We've broadened the composition of the Engineering Advisory Board, who makes up the board, spreading the work more lightly, and as I said, you know, trying to improve consistency by bringing in more people, having more people rate each individual application, taking averages, things like that. And then extra efforts to include and celebrate all the different people in projects, right? You know, wanting to make sure that the sorts of things I put on a slide here, or that we talk about on our website, or that we mention out on the road are open and inclusive of all the different sorts of things that we really want to have in our Maker portfolio and at MIT. So bottom line is, if you're interested in applying to MIT, and if you're the sort of person who spends your time here on the weekend, you know, really this is a potentially good vehicle for you. So I want to quickly go over these questions of what students do when they're actually at MIT. Sorry, my cat machine is broken. Oh, this is a baby. This is Marie. She lives in one of the dormitories where a lot of the students who are here live. Her first word was boom. Her second word was circuit. We're really excited with MIT class of 2030. There we go. So how do we support makers? And I'm going to go over this pretty quickly. There's three things that we've really discovered from talking to MIT students, from surveying them, and from going around trying to figure out that really seem to support MIT students at our institution. One is this concept of learning by doing, which I mentioned earlier, right? It's at the core of the MIT experience that you are trying to marry the expertise of mind with the expertise of hand. All MIT students will do lab work. Most of our students will do research. Most of our students will do product or project-based classes. You know, a classic example of this is an engineering capstone course, 2009, product design. My friend Chris Mills and his team won it a few years. They got a team of people together around the theme of safety and health, and they went and built a bike helmet vending machine that cities can install to accompany their bike share programs to make sure that they have adequate safety available, which is actually a non-trivial challenge that requires all different sorts of engineering expertise. How are you going to get the power in a distributed grid? How are you going to manage the logistics of helmet redistribution? How are you going to manage the sanitation concerns of like random strangers swapping helmets? And this is an example of the sort of course that really gets students excited about making, about doing in their classes. Freedom to make. This is a lounge in one of the MIT dormitories that I've been taking a lot of these pictures from. You'll notice the power tools everywhere. And one of the things that's really incredible about MIT is that in many of our dormitories, not just this one, students have shops, students have tools. They have access not only to the formal labs that I've showed pictures of earlier, but also this kind of like broadly distributed ability to make and try things. I mean, Rewire there, this video right here, you can see this young man who graduated from MIT a few years ago, and he has gone ahead and taken his room and wired a party button into the side of his bed, which, when struck, transforms a dorm room into feel the energy. Now, most dorms, I don't think, would allow students to do this or to build a 140-foot-long roller coaster in the middle of their campus. But this is one of the things that students get to do that they get really excited about. And one is that there's a broadly distributed culture of making. Now, it's very easy to tell the story of making as a story of a lone genius, right? The one inventor, the one crusader, the one really incredibly technically skilled person. But one of the things that we've really found at MIT is that it's the broadly distributed network and culture and community of makers that make it such an incredibly supportive environment. So 2009, that big course that I showed you pictures from, is like the most popular event on campus. It's not the football game, you know, it's everybody coming here to watch what these students have made and put together. And you know, when we ran a survey of MIT students, one of the words that comes up over and over and over and over again is the word surrounded. As in, I'm surrounded by other students who love what I'm doing. I'm surrounded by other students who want to learn how to make things. I'm surrounded by students who you know, celebrate the work that I'm doing and the work that my friends are doing. And what's so powerful about this is that it's not just the strong nodes. It's not just the expert makers. Those people are important, and those people exist. Some of them are here today. The point is that you have this broad community of people. Again, some of the people who are here today, you can go and check out their booth. How did Charles do in the race? He got fourth? Okay, whatever, next time. You can see that we have right here the MIT Department of Silly Go-Karts, who has made an appearance here today. If you come up to MIT in a couple of weeks, you can come to our mini Maker Faire. Generally speaking, if you're one of these creative people, you can be one of the gang. We have a lot of you here at MIT. Thank you all so much for coming.
Excellent, thank you.
Love it. Thank you very much.